When I'm thinking about this, I want to find the top of the head, sort of that center line, so I get the orientation of the head, maybe somewhere where the bottom of the head might be. I don't want to paint larger than life, so I can usually use my hand. I kind of want to go a little smaller than life, so about small, a little under my hand size. That way I have enough room for shoulders here. And just sort of reiterate, I like to keep my stuff very angular and geometric. I try to avoid any sort of circles or half circles. I want to make sure I get a nice straight angle. So if I'm looking up, this is sort of important. So if I think of the head as an oval, if I'm looking up versus down, I need to pay attention to the way the form wraps around. Right, so the ears would line up roughly with the top of the eye ridge, right here. And so say these are his ears, so these little marks here. See how it kind of rounds out. I want to avoid any straight across line, right? I want to make sure I get that form turning this way. Same with the mouth, I want to make sure it wraps around because I'm kind of looking up at it a little bit. Does that make sense? Get rid of my little guy. So when I'm sketching, it's mainly just a blue with a little bit of brown. Blue with brown with a little bit of blue. Jeez. And I want to try to get initially just the way the head's turned. And like I said, for this one, we're mainly going to just look for the big form, and I'll kind of show you a little bit of what I'm talking about. I don't want to get into detail. Also, too, I want to consider the way the light. So usually when we paint portrait, it's going to be Rembrandt lighting, so you have a nice form shadow, definite shadow side, and a definite light side, and then the head will cast a shadow onto the shoulders. You can actually see it on his collar. Right, so I want a definite light and dark side. So this is pretty easy for me here because this center line is pretty much the form shadow. This side of his head's in shadow, and this side's in light. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me just paint for a moment here. So I want to consider where the top of the eye ridge is. So it's about, because I'm looking up, it's a little higher than halfway. So if this is halfway, it's a little higher up, right? And then from here, I want to look for certain angles I want you guys to pay attention to, try to find, and I'm going to mark them on here with red. It's very nice red. I'll never be able to wash out my red.
I was going to say you're going to be brushed. What?
Settler's red.
No, it's called Pyrrole red.
So whenever you might have been taught sight measuring, I really try to avoid that because it's just a big time suck. You just get really sort of micro, like trying to measure these things. What I like to use is angles. If I extend my arm out, just a refresher, and I hold it up, shake it up, and I hold it up to the corner of his eye right here, eye socket, to the bottom of his nose, and I just come over and make that same angle. I'm going to more than likely get the angle correct in terms of the bottom of the nose here. I can mark that as the bottom of the nose. So then I'm going to come over and do the same thing with this outer eye socket. So I know now that this is the outside of this eye socket, outside of this one, and this would be the bottom of the nose. Right, so it's very similar when we paint still life and you have an object here. I'll say, take this corner, triangulate to where this top object is, this object. You guys remember that? Mm-hmm. And for the ones that haven't, I'll show you for the details we paint. So now I know this is the bottom of his nose here, so I'm just going to mark it with a little bit of a shadow because the nose is a structure that comes off and it's essentially a ball itself. If you look at his nose, there's a form shadow right here, and then the nose casts a shadow onto the upper lip. So I'm just putting in that kind of underneath shadow there. You good?
So what is the eye point you're moving from? The eye socket?
Yeah, outside of the eye socket.
Okay.
Yeah. And then here I can see the distance to the top of his ear. So it's pretty close whenever I put that in. Right, so it's top of the ear. There's a muscle here called the sternocleidomastoid. I'll talk about later that I want to find. That'll give you the angle. And then part of the neck here, and then later I just kind of put it in the shoulders and everything. So for today, what we're going to try to focus on is just getting the big structures. First, we're going to want to find the eye ridge, top of the eye ridge, not the middle of the eyes, top of the eye ridge. Okay. The eye sockets.
Is
nose.
is the eye ridge the top of the eyebrow?
Yeah, that's what I meant. The
Okay.
brow ridge, top of the eye.
Okay.
But you're talking about the eye orb.
Right.
the
Right.
eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is on the eyebrow usually,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
What did I say? Eye ridge. Sorry, brow
Yeah.
ridge.
Okay.
It's even eye ridge. Brow ridge. Excuse me, guys. Yes. That's this. So I don't want to go any higher for his eyebrows. So here I'm going to work on the hairline. Just going to block this in for now. And so what I'm trying to get again is this definite structure here. One thing I talked about, and I'll talk about a lot moving forward, is I want to make sure I'm not concerned with likeness. I'm not thinking how can I make this look like Dan, or why does Dan look this way, and what is wrong with him now? How do I capture Dan's likeness? First, if I get the structure, I'll capture anybody's likeness if I have the structure. If I have the skull right, if I understand that he has a bigger jaw, right? Men have bigger jaws than women, or maybe he has a more prominent brow ridge. If I capture those, I'm going to get his likeness because the structure underneath is what gives that likeness. So I'm not focused on features; I'm focused on structure. So here, I want to get once I find the bottom of the nose, side of the head, I want to try to find the eye sockets themselves. And so I'm looking at the entire eye socket and not the features. So I'm going to block that in so it kind of looks like Iron Man or Spider-Man, depending on who you like. The reason why we block in the eye sockets is because the eyes are always in shadow. This recedes in, right? So if you think of the skull and you have the eye socket, it's a cavity. Right, it goes inside. So the eyeball sits what's inside. It's always in shadow. So I want to go ahead and just kind of block it in so I understand what the structure is. You good? Dan, you good?
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure. And so when I was talking to Darcy, I kind of like there's facial hair. It makes it so much easier because I can follow the kind of the hairline of the beard from the bottom of the nose down, and the mouth is hidden. So all I have to worry about is pulling out the highlight of the bottom lip because the hair kind of covers everything else. It makes it really simple. So here's my initial sketch. So from here, I want to start working on refining these big structures, but not to the point where I put the eyeballs in and I get the nose. I just want to make sure that I have everything, one, in proportion, everything relates to each other correctly. I have the mouth structure correctly. I'm going to start adding a little more paint and getting a little thicker with it. I want to make sure I have the thickness of the neck correct. I might have been a little thin here. I want to make sure I get this bottom part, the jaw structure. So if I'm looking at it straight on, kind of latches on here is like the teeth, here will be the nose cavity. I get this bottom part right, and then the distance between the brow ridge to the hairline itself, so I get the forehead structure correct. Okay, so from there, if I have this in, I'm in a pretty good spot. Now when I can start considering some temperature, and I'm gonna keep it very simple. I'm not gonna get into details. And the reason why I keep saying that, and I brought it up last time, and Mike might be able to make a comment, you get really sucked into the detail. And then you start doing this, and I'll come by like, hey, we're not gonna do that just yet. Yeah, I got you. And then you start, and then towards the end of the session, you're like, ugh, I just got away from me, like, yeah, I kind of said something, Mike. Or whoever, not just Mike, I'm picking on Mike, but.
I got one good looking eyelash though.
You did it. I wanna make sure I get structure down, and then I'm gonna focus on temperature.
So you're gonna start putting skin tones in?
Yes, so I'm just wanna get light, on mid-tone, shadow side, and then I'm gonna pull out some highlights, but I wanna keep it very, very basic. So I'm gonna speed up really quick. So this is where I switch to my big brush. And I want to start thinking in temperature. So when I'm mixing skin tone, the reason why I love painting with just these colors is one, I'm limited, and I can mix anything I want if I have the primaries. It's just the way color works. I don't have to pull out, skin tone Dan and put it on the palette. I want to look for temperature. So the shadow side, because it's a warm light, it's a cool shadow. If I have a cool light, it's a warm shadow, but I always usually paint with a warm light. I want to look for that shadow, and also valleys. If I put that down for the shadow side, that's really cool and I could probably go a little darker with it. So I'm going to drop a little more brown into it and just a tad bit of red.
Brown you're using raw umber?
Burnt sienna.
But there's,
Burnt sienna.
oh, okay, just burnt sienna.
Just burnt sienna.
Okay.
I want to avoid burnt umber because they'll get too earthy. And so I'm getting this kind of gestalt principle here where I have a light shadow that's telling me what the form looks like. And if I'm continually mixing, I'm going to move over so it goes from cool to warm, dark to light. So all the people process is dark to light. Thick over thin. Oh, I forgot about this one. I'm going to waste your yellow, I'm so sorry. Thick over thin, or fat over lean. So when we mix anything, I want to try to, the mid-tone is that's the mid-tone when the lights are off. Right, that's what I want to mix. I don't want to mix the bright part and then put it on there, because it's going to be too bright. And I can't, with all the Prima, if you get too much white or too light and you start trying to paint over it, you're just going to desaturate the color to where it just looks gray, or it gets away from you. You lose
It's
a lot of
muddy,
that.
yeah, muddy.
Very muddy. So, I think a little pink. So what I do, skin tone is inherently cool, anyways. So I mixed up a little bit of white, yellow, a little bit of red, and I put a little bit of blue to cool it off, so it's not so like peachy.
That's a pink.
Yeah. So you can see here, when I add a little more blue, it gets a little grayer. And a little more flesh tone kind of looking. It's very subtle, right? This is sort of where I want to be here. And again, I'm not terribly worried about detail. I want to just get the basic structure so I kind of understand what's happening here. Put a little more blue in this. If you look on his temple, just a little cooler right here. As it goes into the shadow, it's a little darker, a little cooler. So if I put this down and I think automatically, well, that feels a little purple, I'm not terribly concerned because one, I think I have my value correct, and it's still cool in temperature. It may not be exactly what I see, but it's gonna work because it's still cool in temperature. And I'm not terribly concerned because I'm gonna paint over it anyhow. So one thing, reason why I say that is just trying to get caught up in mixing the perfect color or value, and you're like, okay, that's the skin tone I want, that's Dan. And then you mix up a big pile of it, and you think you're gonna keep dipping into there. It sort of defeats the purpose of what Ala Prima kind of is you get to add on those different layers of temperature and value that start to build up and make that form. Right? It's not as sort of paint by number. It's more of a sculptural approach, which is, I'll talk about it more, but you know, I really take this sculptural approach like I was a sculptor, sort of modeling Dan here. You okay?
So it's a slightly cooler good tone you're using now?
Yep. So you can see how it's starting to kind of warm up. But even though it's cool, it's on the warmer side. So every hue, red has a cool and a warm side. Yellow has a cool and a warm side. So whatever, I just want to make sure I can get that temperature shift, even if it's subtle, to show that form turning. Because although this seems somewhat bright, I want this base on there so when I do waste more of Darcy's paint, I'll make this little, and I really put that warm temperature on there, like the highlight on the zygomatic here. It'll be a really bright highlight, right? So if this is, it's really not that bright. Let me tone that down. If this is the highlight, you can see the difference in the drastic shift between my midtone and this highlight, which means I could probably come up a little more in value, which is a good thing because if I start here, this really bright yellow, and I start painting and I realize, wow, this is really stark. The contrast is too high and I want to push it down, I can't because there's already white mixed into the paint. I've already desaturated and tinted the color and I'm sort of in a bad spot and just sort of wipe and restart. So I'd rather be in this situation where I have levels to come up and play with temperature. I'm gonna let you guys paint. I always feel like when I talk to Mommy, I lose you guys. So here, if I was just sort of speeding through this on my own, I would start to consider some of these little small shifts here. Picking up light here. Kind of add it on there. Start to pick up the highlight here. A few things to note, like nose, ears, lips. Inside of the eye socket, it's going to be a little more red, a little more blood there. And I want to make my marks following the form, right? I don't want to just sort of make sort of random, I don't know, paint brush marks. You know, I don't want to fiddle around. I want to paint with, make a mark that has some sort of purpose. I can see here, there's a little bit of green, so we have a little more greenish tone around the cheeks, especially men around the beard. So I'm gonna stop painting in a second, I promise. I'm just gonna drop a little blue in my yellow, make sure it's too much blue. And so what I'm trying to do is just this basic here, this, again, there's no detail in the nose here. I'm just getting the temperature shifts and the overall structure. I'm not worried about pretty much anything else at this point. I just want this, I wanna kinda be here after 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half. And I can start to pull out a little more of this form, but I'm not even, I wouldn't really wanna even paint in here unless to pick up a little bit of this reflected light. That's back here, this little triangle shape. But other than that, this is sort of where I wanna stop today. Does that make sense? Because here I can start to kind of refine my eye socket, say, okay, that's a little high, a little low, pull this in here. And this is where that sort of discovery happens, where I start to figure out, try to translate what I'm seeing on canvas here. I'm gonna pop in the ear. In the ear, I just usually put a big red thing, red mark for the ear. Later I'll sort it out. Okay, cool. Easy peasy.